Welcome to Carrickfergus Vineyard, a place of hope where lives are changing. We're a church in the heart of Carrickfergus, passionate about seeing people's lives changed by the love of Jesus. The following message was given at one of our Sunday services.
Well, good morning to you. It is great to gather together. Parents of little ones, if you hadn't figured out already, you didn't know before, there's no kind of direct children's provision during the weeks of July, but there will be back in August. So during the talk, that is, yeah. So anyway, welcome, good to see you. St Albans, anyone heard of St Albans, the place, Hertfordshire? It holds special meaning to me. It's a city, it's a small city. I Googled it this morning, 81,000 people. It's special to me because I was born there in the hospital. And I remember actually one of my earliest memories as a child, as a small child. I remember going to the Roman Museum. It was a Roman kind of settlement. There's loads of cracker artifacts and all that sort of stuff. And I remember as a small child being taken to the museum, and I remember seeing these open caskets of real life skeletons from like, I don't know, gazillion years ago. And I remember as a child, honestly, it's one of my earliest memories, as a child, at bedtime, going to bed, being quite fearful of, oh my gosh, is that what happens? Like, when time's up, you just die and you're just a bag of bones. Is that it? Like, genuinely. And it created in me, as a really early child, this early memory of what happens to me when I die. And I remember it being actually probably one of the first little markers towards faith in Jesus, actually, and giving my life to Jesus. But that's not the point of the story at all. Years later, I was baptized in the Abbey. In fact, it's possible, although I can't be secure on this, it's possible I was the first person to be fully immersed baptism in St Albans Abbey or St Albans Cathedral, because they would usually do the water in the bowl sprinkle stuff. My church were able to get access to the Abbey. They brought in this big water pool. It was freezing cold. They had one of those heating elements. You remember the old kettles where they had like the kind of the coiled bit of metal that heats the water? It literally had one of those on a piece of string. It was so bad. I mean, health and safety, there was none. It was literally dangling in the water all day long, and it was absolutely Baltic, and I was the first one to go in. So that was that. So again, a special meaning. Not the point of the story at all. The point of the story is, as a child, we would have gone to the Abbey, just occasionally, just sightseeing kind of thing, not place of worship or anything like that. And I remember my folks would have picked up a couple of those, like they were tiny, kind of square-like Bible stories about some of the early biblical characters. And I wasn't particularly literate then. Some would say still not now, to be fair. But I was absolutely taken by these early Bible stories. And I would take them, I probably was, I'm guessing, what would you read? 6, 7, 8 years of age, something like that. And I would read them. Again, this is an early memory of steering and moving towards relationship with Jesus. There was something about the stories and the Bible characters that so captured my heart and captured my attention. I really, really paid attention. I love reading those stories that we read about in the Gospels. That is an incredibly long introduction to our new series, which starts today, called Heroes of the Faith. And what we're going to do, you're going to hear from a different voice every single week over the next 9 weeks throughout July and August, where we're going to look at various heroes of the faith. Some of them are going to be people that are really well known to us. And there's whole books written about them. There's loads of stuff. I mean, I'm really looking forward to hearing Ellie McElrath, who's already had a go at teaching the entire book of Daniel, which I think is 10 or 11 chapters. She did it at one of her encounter nights. I was like, fair play. Like, she is incredible, by the way. I was like, you might want to take on a passage, not the entire book, but anyway. So we're going to look at different Bible characters over the next few weeks. And we want to look at what do we know about them. But it's not just what we know about them, because as you know, this isn't school where we just learn knowledge and try and regurgitate it. We learn stuff so that we can apply it to our lives. So we want to learn about these heroes of the faith and what they did, so that it inspires us that we would emulate, that we would be like them. So for today, who have we got lined up for today? Oh, it's exciting. Today then, our first Bible hero of the faith character is Andrew. And there he is. I know what you're thinking, Chosen fans. It's the real Andrew. Yes, yes. It really is the actor of Andrew. So, seeing as this isn't school, but back to school, what do we know about Andrew? He was the brother of Peter. He was a disciple. He was a fisherman. Anything else that we know? Oh, good. You're a cracker. Thank you, Roy. Thank you. Going a bit deeper. He brought Peter to Jesus. Good point. Anything else? Oh. Yes, Alan. He was a disciple of John the Baptist, which we're coming to in a minute. Anything else off the bat? No. Good. Okay, here we go. Well, first of all, his name is Greek, which is really unusual. Most names would have been Hebrew, but he's from the north of Israel, and his name is a Greek name, and it's from Greek culture. And it's translated means manly or brave. And he certainly was incredibly brave, and we're going to learn a bit about that as we go on here. But the theme throughout what I want to share this morning is that Andrew was a person who introduced others to Jesus. Andrew introduced people to the person of Jesus. Second story of the morning. Chantel's going to be dying off right now. Ah, there we go. This is clearly Chantel, as you know very well. The person on the right, I kind of cropped out of the picture. She's a good friend, Tanya, of Chantel's as well. But it's the person on the left. That girl there, she's called Emily. Emily Hall was her maiden name. She's now Emily Gate. And Emily was a young person in my youth group. My first proper job when I was about 21, 22, I was a youth pastor in a church, and Emily was kind of like the top end. She was like 17, 18 or so. And she's incredibly, just a great girl. And at the end of her kind of school time, she went and did a gap year, and she went and did a discipleship course in the nearby town where I'm from called Watford, with a brilliant, brilliant church there. And during her time there, she met Chantel. And I was catching up one time in the house where they all lived. There's about 20 of you or so lived in this really, really big house. And I was visiting another friend, and I just bumped into Emily. I was like, "Oh, Emily, how are you doing? Oh, it's good. How's the course going?" And she's like, "Oh, it's really good. I've met lots of really great people. In fact, my roommate is this really nice girl called Chantel. She's from Northern Ireland." "Oh, great. That's fantastic. I'm meeting my friend." In walks Chantel. Emily, Paul, this is Chantel. Great, fantastic. Wasn't love at first sight. Not going to be honest. Not going to be honest with you. Beautiful accent, pleasing on the eye, but it wasn't love at first sight. I'll be honest. Weeks later, Emily is having a birthday party in a pub in a village called Chorleywood, where I went to school, and I was invited to go along. Now, it was kind of like, it must have been like 19, she probably was or so, and I was like the 20-something, but I kind of figured, I know I'm going to come on to the older bit, so it's not so weird kind of thing. Okay, you'd done university, we'll just clear that one up. And so anyway, I thought I'll go along to the party and da-di-da-di-da and have a drink and tick the box and go home early, which I do quite often still. And rock and roll. And anyway, I got chatting to this lovely girl called Chantel during that night. And literally the two of us had this conversation. We really, really hit it off. And do you know what we talked about? Do you want to know? we actually talked about this. We talked about church and what we want to do in life, and we talked about the Lord and young people and our passion for working with young people. That's what we talked about. And during that conversation, I went home. I was just like, flip, she's all right. Yeah, wow. In fact, actually, you went back to her parents' house, and Emily Vesey said to you, you're going to marry that guy. Didn't she say that? You thought, no way. Sorry. This is terrible a story. It's to illustrate the point that Emily introduced me to Chantel. We never know who we're going to introduce. We never know how important introductions are. Let's use the Bible. The stories are fun, aren't they? But let's use the Bible. We're in John chapter 1. John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin, has been baptizing the River Jordan, preparing the way. And he had some followers himself. He had disciples with him. And this is what we read. This is what John wrote. He says, the next day, John was there again with two of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, look, the Lamb of God. When the two disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. They didn't follow him in the discipleship sense of the word. They literally just followed where Jesus was going. And they, turning around, Jesus saw them following. He said, what do you want? He said, Rabbi, which means teacher, where are you staying? Come, he replied, and you will see. So they went and saw where he was staying, and they spent that day with him. It was about 4 p.m. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon, tell him, we have found the Messiah, that is the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, you are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas, which when translated is Peter. Andrew and the other disciple of John, which is said that it was John, the gospel writer himself, loads of Johns going on here. He points out, he says, look, there's the Lamb of God. Jesus says, what do you want? The first thing that that Andrew does after this is he goes back and he tells his brother Peter all about Jesus. I've lost myself completely. Give me a moment. That's simply it. He introduces him to Jesus. They've been longing for him. The people of Israel, they've been longing for Messiah. They've been longing for him to come, to come. I was so tempted to show a chosen clip. For those of you who've watched it, you know the one. He's so excited. Andrew goes, he tells him. And this is prior to the time when we read in the other Gospels when Jesus literally is at the shore of the Sea of Galilee, where he invites his brother, both brothers, Andrew and Peter, together. So Andrew, the older brother of the two, first thing he does is he introduces introduces Peter to Jesus. Another point just to make here is that Andrew was secure enough in himself to play second fiddle. Andrew was the first to be the disciple, but he was prepared to introduce Peter, who has actually become, in many ways, more important or used even more than his younger brother Peter. And in fact, Andrew was a disciple himself first. He was the disciple of John. And there's some thinking in that he was perhaps more talented. He was perhaps more learned than Peter himself. But yet, he was prepared and happy, even through kind of civil rivalry, to have his younger brother take a more kind of prominent position. So, we never know how impactful our relationship is with the people in our lives who is around that we may introduce to Jesus sometime. Second story, and I'll speed up, is the triumphant entry. Jesus, days before the cross, he's entered into Jerusalem. We know the story. He's come on the donkey. And in those tumultuous days where all of these hundreds and thousands of people have gathered to the temple in Jerusalem for Passover festival, and there's some Greek people there, and they want to talk to Jesus. We read in John's Gospel 12, now there were some Greeks among those who went up to worship at the festival. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee. So they go to Philip. He's a different disciple. He's one of the 12. They go with a request. They say, Sir, they said, we would like to see Jesus. Philip went to tell Andrew. Andrew and Philip in turn told Jesus. What's so significant about this? What's going on? Well, up until this point, Jesus instructed his disciples to only go to the lost sheep of Israel. We learn in Matthew 10, whenever he sends the 12 out to the different towns and villages, he doesn't send them further afield yet. He says, do not go among the Gentile people or enter any town of the Samaritans. Rather, go to the lost sheep of Israel. So their mandate to that moment was, just go to our own fellow people, to the Jewish nation. Go there first. And so that was what they were instructed to do. The Greek people were Gentiles. They were from outside of Jewish tradition. And they wanted to sit at the table. They wanted to speak to Jesus. But you can imagine, like, he was a celebrity. He'd come on this donkey. There was absolute uproar. Everyone wanted to see him. Everyone wanted to hear him. And some people wanted a face-to-face conversation with him. And so they go to Philip, because Philip has a Greek name, like Andrew has a Greek name. And they request permission. They realize this guy, Philip, knows Jesus. Can you put in a good word? Can you get kind of close towards Jesus so that we can have this conversation? But Philip doesn't go to Jesus. Philip goes to Andrew first, and it's important that we understand that. What's going on? Again, possibly not fact, but possibly fact. One of these wonderful things as we delve into the scriptures and we learn just a bit more. There was a hierarchical kind of structure in amongst them. We know of the three closest ones, of Peter, James, and John. But Andrew also was a very close disciple to Jesus within the 12. Again, how do we know that? Well, we know that because in the synoptic gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they are written. The 12 names are actually written. And in Matthew and Luke, I think it is. It's somewhere in my notes. If it's not, I think it's Matthew and Luke. The names are actually listed as Peter, then Andrew, second name, then James and John, then the other 8. And it's important that we know that because it's written in kind of order of importance of those that Jesus chose to be with himself, closer to himself, and were used for the purposes that he had within the future. And so Andrew had a special, unique, close relationship with Jesus. And in this moment, Andrew uses his close relationship with Jesus, this place of prominence that he has, in order to introduce the Greek people to Jesus. Jesus would have been hounded by so many individuals, but it was Andrew who introduced. He went outside of the mandate of the lost sheep of Israel, and he introduced Gentile people to Jesus. And that's an important part of Andrew's story. The third and the last story of introduction, Andrew, the one that introduced people to Jesus, is the feeding of the 5,000. John chapter 6, 5-9. Jesus looked up, sees a big crowd. He says to Philip, where shall we buy bread for all these people? He asked this only to test him. He knew what he was going to do. Philip says it would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many? And we know the rest of the story. The point here is brief. Andrew is the one mentioned only by John. He's not mentioned in the other Gospels, but he was the one that began to provide a physical solution to a massive, massive problem. He sees this little boy with a packed lunch, and he brings what is available and he puts it into Jesus' hands. And when we put things into Jesus' hands, he has a tremendous knack of being able to do cool stuff with it. And so again, we learn another brilliant story about Andrew, the first called disciple, that in this moment, Andrew introduces this little boy, the solution to the problem, to Jesus. The conclusion simply is this. Who are you praying for? Who are you spending time with? Who are you investing in? Who is it that God's called you in your life that you might introduce to Jesus? And you may never know the importance and the significance of that introduction, of how impactful that one life could be to so many. We've no idea. But in this moment, as we're listening and we're learning about this disciple that went before us, that we'll meet someday in heaven, we can ask him all the stories, all the questions. But who is it that we are investing in? Who are we praying for that they might know Jesus? Lastly, you can put it up there. It's a proud moment, Steve. He's about to stand and start singing. Is it the Flower of Scotland? Is that what? Yeah, there he is. Proud Scotsman. Andrew, St. Andrew, is said to have been martyred by crucifixion in around AD 60. And it's said that Andrew was not crucified in the method that most would have been crucified and the method of which Jesus was crucified. It is said that he was crucified on what was known as a crux desusa, which is an X-shaped cross or saltire, and it's now commonly known as the St. Andrew's Cross. Supposedly at his own request, as he deemed himself unworthy to be crucified on the same cross of Jesus himself.
Thanks for listening to the Carrickfergus Vineyard podcast. If you'd like to find out more about our church, please visit our website at carrickfergusvineyard.org.